Thank you very much, Dr. Venkat. So now we're going to start with our session 1. And to begin with, I request Mr. G.B. Prasad, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Dr. Reddy's Research Laboratories, to please come to the podium. Mr. Prasad.
Good morning. When I sit here, I feel really Dr. Reddy's presence in this room. There's so many of you who had a special relationship with him. And, as an individual, he was most at his best. He was at his best when he was talking science and with the scientists. And if he probably wanted to be remembered as somebody, I think it would be as a scientist foremost, and then as an innovator, entrepreneur, philanthropist, businessman. I always used to be envious of all of you, really, who worked with him very, very closely. He always had this special relationship with scientists. You could see it in his laughter, his joy, his enthusiasm for the work, and all of that, which I never shared with him. Though I was running a big business, making money for the company and all of that, but he never had that same relationship that he had with many of you, when he was discussing science with you. I used to be quite envious of that special bond between all of you and him. So I can feel his presence here through all of you, through people who worked with him very, very closely, discussed science, discussed development, discussed developments that are happening in the field and all of that. I and Satish, while we were running the business, we would go and start giving him updates about what is happening on the business. And 2-3 minutes into the conversation, he would have figured out what we were saying and then start yawning and saying, okay, come on. So his first love was science. We could capture maybe 3-4 minutes of his attention when we talked about our API business or generics business or some milestone that we achieved. He would, smile and say, good, very good. But then, this is what is happening in the lab, and this is the science that is happening, and that would really, excite him. So I think it is very fitting that we have this tribute here. And even this conference room reminds me of the conference room in the Dr. Reddy's Foundation, which Venkat and he were, very involved in building that whole space. So, I can feel his presence here. I can hear his laughter, that full-throated laughter that many of you experienced working with him. So it's very special to be here among all of you on this occasion. He is with us. He is with us through all of you, through the work that all of you do to really make this whole thing come alive. So thank you. And I wanted to share some of the lessons that I learned from him. I'm sure all of you have stories about how you worked with him and took away something from him, but there are 4 or 5 lessons that I as an individual learned from him. I first met him in 1985 when he kind of interviewed me to, for his daughter. And he was just founding Dr. Reddy's Laboratories at that time. And so I asked him what was his revenue for that year. And he said 3 crores or something like that. It was 84, 85. And he said in 95 will be 100 crores. He just said that with a very straight face. And I said, man, that's very audacious. And it's just 3 crores and he's saying 100 crores. And I think he achieved it a year earlier than that. And he was always thinking big in everything that he did, And then from there he said 1,000 crores, 10,000 crores, and on and on and on. But that was just numbers. It was not the money that motivated him, but the largeness of how you think. And so that large vision, and he was always, excited about how many patients take his medicines, not, how much money we'd make. And he would have had this, many of you would have seen this thing on his whiteboard. He had written in his own handwriting saying, medicines are for the people and it is not for the money. And if you remember this, the money will follow. This was a quote from George Merck, and it was always there on his thing. And I don't know, that's something that I think resonated very well with his own thinking. So this big thing about large vision, thinking beyond money, thinking about impact, thinking really, really big, and not worry about resources. In his last 1 year back when we passed away, we had a memorial speech. Somebody who worked very closely with NTR said this about both NTR and him. He said both were very similar in some things. He said they both believed that everything can be done. There was nothing impossible. And this is Mr. Dora, who was intelligence chief and worked with him. I also felt that way. He would never look at the resources or the constraints, but just the possibilities. So that was something I remember. The other thing he had was a very large heart. And I'm sure Raghu knows about this. Whoever came to him and met him got what he wanted. So the only way he would refuse something if he didn't meet you, and he would say, I don't want to meet you. And that's the signal when he's not going to give you something, right, that you're going to ask for. But whoever went with him, whatever request, he would just get the checkbook and then write the check first. And sometimes we were his brakes. We had to tell him, no, don't do that. And we would say about budgets, about costs, about all this. Even this institute, when Chandrababu Naidu called and asked us to meet him, we went and met him. And then he said, I want you to give 10 crores or something like that for this institute. Chandrababu Naidu said this. And then without even looking at us, he said, yeah, it's done. And then it ended up that we funded a lot more than 10 crores. Maybe 30, 40 crores and then operating costs and all that. But he never looked back. He said, let's finish, let's do it, let's go on doing it. So it's large-heartedness, something I also, admire in him. The third thing I think I learned from him was when he trusted somebody, he would completely trust him, give him full empowerment, and support him completely. And it was really, amazing for many of us. We all grew intellectually, grew as individuals, taking risks that we would never have done if somebody had not put that faith and trust in us and empowered us. And we made many, many mistakes, but he would never point it out and criticize us for the mistakes. He would always say, yeah, it's okay, it'll be fine, just keep doing what you're doing. And I remember I spent about 40 crores of the company's money building a formulation plant in 95. Everybody was saying it was a white elephant. And my own colleagues were saying, you went overboard, you spent too much. And business was not coming for 3, 4, 5 years, and we had loans, we had borrowed money, paying interest, and it was eating into the profits. Everybody was criticizing us. But he just, was very, very positive about it and said, just remember why we did this. Maybe 1 year, 2 years, we'll have to wait, but it's going to be great. And he would always give me that confidence. So that's something, I think all of us as managers have grown incredibly because of the faith he put in us, the positivity with which he encouraged us, and also the trust. Then, another important lesson was his focus. He would not be interested in many things. Actually, once he thought a problem was solved, he would move on. He would not dwell on it. Now, if you look back, the API industry in Hyderabad was at a very primitive stage when he started his business. This is in 1985. And the whole business took off. Everybody learned the lessons. People who worked at Dr. Reddy's went out. They also started. They flourished. And the whole industry grew at an amazing pace. And most people in the industry will tell you that he was a pioneer in the API industry. But somewhere in the mid-90s, that was done for him. So he had moved on. He had moved on not even into generics, but into drug discovery. And what was over was over. He would just completely forget what he was achieved, and then move on to the next mountain to be conquered. And he would pursue that with relentless focus. So once he had moved on, nothing would interest him. So if we were talking to him about generics or API, he would say, yes, yes, you are earning enough money so that I can invest in drug discovery, which is good. And that's why it is good, not because we did great stuff there, because he had moved on in his mind. And when he was on a problem, he was so laser focused. He would call us morning, evening, afternoon, and many of you scientists, I think he was really after you guys. Did you do the experiment? What is the result? And I know that during his morning walks, he would call Uday at all times of the day or night, and then have this conversation, and he would be very energized after his morning walk about what he heard on the previous day's work in Atlanta. So if he was focused on something, he was very, very focused. He would, just ask you very precisely what he wanted to know, and he would do that relentlessly till, he got his answer. So that's something to learn about also, to the exclusion of everything else. If he focused on something, that is what would have mattered. So these are some of the lessons. Of course, he was boundless in his optimism. Whenever I was depressed, I would go in and talk to him a little bit, and in 2 minutes, I would come back with a lot of energy, and that enthusiasm was so infectious. We all miss him, but at the same time, the institutions that he created perpetuate his memory through all of you. So thank you very much for being here and sharing this day's proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prasad. Now I request Dr. Venkat to present a memento to Mr. Prasad.